I think the first thing was it was, at least to me, kind of a surprise when I saw that research. And that was an NPR article. I think it was like a PwC like CEO report that they run every year. In the public, you think that, oh, CEOs get fired because of poor financial performance, right? They get replaced, right? Just recently, I'm calling in from Glendale, 2 or 3 miles from Burbank, Disney headquarters, right? And we know, Bob Iger recently came back in as CEO, largely because Disney, financially wasn't doing what, its shareholders thought it should be doing, right? And so I think in the general populace, as most people think, yeah, CEOs get replaced when their companies don't do well. And as you called out, that was reason number two. But workplace misconduct, reason number one, that I think has been something that we've seen for years now. It's something that we knew and have kind of built our company around, where now this kind of varies, I think, depending upon your view of an organization. But let's talk about a vertical organization as opposed to a flatter company, right? Where you do have, the ethics, the values, the way forward, which comes from the top down, right? Which bleeds into the rest of the organization. Just simply the way that senior leaders talk to their VPs, the way that VPs then engage with the directors and on down into the organization. That's power every moment. That power, that leadership that comes through in that communication is in many ways an example for the other people in that organization, right? I'm not talking about something that's complex or unheard of. That's what I think most people see in very vertical organizations, small startups. Maybe it's a little bit different where it's, one, leader and then a whole bunch of VPs under them, that kind of a thing. But in general, when you think about company performance, yeah, workplace misconduct is a huge driving factor of not just share price and what I'll just call kind of like value accretion in an organization, but also retention, people sticking around, right? Recognizing that the company that they work for in many ways is a reflection of who they are and what they stand for and what their values are. And especially in a tight labor market, right? If you're in a position where you're having people leave a company because of the actions of a CEO, because they know they can go around the corner and get a job at, Schmoz Tech Incorporated, their big competitor, then they're going to go do that, right? And so, when it comes to workplace misconduct, when it comes to executive behavior, it's one of these things where it's been a real challenge to identify such misconduct and where it exists. And I think that has been kind of the easy way out in many ways for a lot of companies to say, yeah, well, how are we going to know that this guy was going to harass somebody? How are we really going to know that, they would lead us down this path of fraud? How are we really, it's tough to know, right? Can I swear on this podcast, by the way?
Sure, go ahead.
Stuff happens, right? Like that was kind of the mentality, I think, for a lot of boards. But now it's, that article you quoted us from 2018, but just this week, 2 days ago, an article came out from the SEC that says they're now beginning to enforce legislation on workplace misconduct and holding companies accountable, the SEC, for workplace misconduct and not having the controls in place to get those things in check inside of a company. Because with technology, it is easier to identify this workplace misconduct, right? These results are out there, and we call it in our industry kind of the standard of care, right? What is the minimum amount of check that we should all pursue? What is the minimum amount of spend? How can we cover risk in a cost-effective way? Essentially, how do we identify this risk without breaking the bank? And can enough people afford it? Can enough people get it that this should become, the new standard, right? So that's really where where this comes from, which is to say, like, for so long, I think companies have been able to ignore this because, hey, how do we track it down? It's not our responsibility. We can't do anything about it, right? But now I think technology has gotten to a point where companies can identify this sort of misconduct. They can take action on it. They can put the tools in place to identify it early. And this isn't just for, management teams and screening when it comes to hiring, but now you have investors who are putting money into management teams and leadership teams, whether it's asset managers, private equity funds, et cetera. They're going to have to start looking at this sort of workplace misconduct as a function of the types of companies that they back.